Ladies and gentlemen, please put your hands together for Chastity Pratt Dawsey.
So, people ask me all the time, Chastity, why have you been writing about these schools for so long? 15 long years. Well, actually, it started for me in 7th grade at Farwell Middle School on the city's east side. Okay, so one day somebody had this bright idea. We're gonna pass around 2 sheets of paper. One sheet of paper had all the girls' names on it. The other sheet of paper had all the boys' names on it. It was like a beauty contest, right? We had to rate each other from 0 to 5. So it's 1986. 7th grade girls are wearing those Guess jeans and all them bright colors. Getting your hair done at Vantina's. And wearing those belt buckles with your name on it. I still want one of those. Those were the girls who got the 4s and the 5s. I had a played-out Jerry curl. I wore my cousin Marla's hand-me-downs. So all the boys in 7th grade gave me 0s. I was the only girl who got all 0s, so yeah, that hurt. So while we standing around talking about all my 0s, little did we know that the math and academic games teacher, Mr. Stevens, was listening. Now, Mr. Stevens had taught me that you pronounce your name how it's supposed to be pronounced, Chastity. So this day, I hear Chastity. I'm already having a bad day, y'all. And now everybody is looking at me. And it feels like there's a spotlight on me and the whole world is looking at me. I'm having a bad day. And it feels like the room is throbbing. I'm like, what? And what he said, I will never forget. Chastity will be a success at whatever she chooses to do. Hold up now. At this point in my life, I'm only good at 2 things. I'm good at looking after kids because I was the big sister and role model to Ina, Erica, Sloan, Gary, Monique, Megan, David. I was the oldest of 8. So I was good at looking after kids, and I was good at school, you know, mostly reading and writing. I had won the Area E regional essay contest. But nobody ever told me where these 2 things would get me, and they damn sure never told me I was gonna be a success. So I looked around the room, and some of those kids, the ones who had given me 0s even, they were nodding their heads. They were agreeing with Mr. Stevens. They might have thought I was ragtag, but even they thought I was gonna be a success. So right there in the 7th grade at Farwell Middle School, I went from being a 0 to somebody. I was gonna be a success. So yeah, okay, I'm gonna be a success. I took that attitude to Cass Technical High School. Yeah. And I was an editor on the newspaper, and I won another essay writing contest. I choose this. This is working out for me. I'm gonna be a journalist. Okay, yeah, I'm gonna do this. And I'm gonna be a success. I go on to the University of Michigan. I write for the newspapers there, and I get one of the best internships ever at the Washington Post. Yes, I'm gonna be a success, right? And then, you know, I graduate from Michigan, one of them loud A's, I got a lot of A's and no C's. I'm like, your girl's gonna be a success, right? So I graduate, and then I get the big kahuna internship, y'all, the New York Times. Yes, your girl was gonna be a success. So then it's time to get a real job. And I didn't have to start, though, at one of those little small Rudy Poot newspapers. I started at the newspaper in Portland, Oregon. It was a pretty good newspaper, too, y'all, but around this time, life got really real for Chastity. my family was going through some hard times, so I took my sisters with me to Oregon to live. I mean, remember, I'm good at two things, taking care of kids in school, so they went with me. I was 21, and the twins were 15. Yeah, we left Brightmoor, got on a plane, flew 3,000 miles away from where anybody knew or loved us to Portland. There I was, 21, 100 pounds, dripping wet, holding my luggage with two teenagers. And life got real scary when I realized I was in charge of their education. So you know what I did? The first thing I did was I told them what Mr. Stevens told me. You will be a success. Now, the schools in Portland, they were better than DPS, but they weren't. So I assigned them to read Zora Neale Hurston. I assigned them to read Richard Wright. I assigned them their first real research paper. And then I found out school kind of has to happen outside of school. So we hiked through the waterfalls in Oregon. We went to the coast. We went to California, Hollywood, LA. They got to touch the Pacific Ocean, the one they had learned about in school. And you know what the twins did? They changed on me. They changed their vocabulary for the better. They changed their diction for the better. They changed their grades for the better. Their eyes were wide open. And so were mine. My eyes were wide open because I saw how education changed them. And I saw my future. If I really wanted to do journalism right, if I really wanted it to be a success, I was going to write about education, and I was going to write about it in a way that it would change other kids the way I saw education change the twins. So after about a year, I sent the twins back to Brightmoor. But they would go on to be the second and the third family to graduate from college. They are now making bigger moves and bigger money than me, so it worked out. Shout out to the twins. But in Portland, I worked my way up to writing about education. But then I said, okay, wait a minute. If I'm really going to do education, if I'm really going to do journalism, if I'm really going to be a success, I have to get back to the media capital. By the time I was 25, I had worked my way up to being an education reporter at Newsday in New York. Yes, the 6th largest newspaper at the time. I was 25. I was being a success. And I hated it. I'm gonna let you in on a little secret. I was assigned to write about Long Island schools, and they are pretty good, pretty well funded. I had to look really hard and scrounge up to find those corners of poverty and brown kids and black kids that really needed a change. And I just wasn't having an impact. I wasn't changing anything for anybody. Then 9/11 happened. What? People were dying. People were crying. They had me going out here tiptoeing around this nasty ass hole in the ground that was coughing up this smoke that looked like it was gonna give you cancer. I ain't built for that, y'all. All I could think about was my mama or my grandma Bessie was gonna have a heart attack if they knew what I was out there breathing in. But you know what? As Providence would have it, around that time, the Detroit Free Press called me and offered me a job nobody else wanted. So I left the biggest story of our generation, New York's 911, to come back to Detroit to cover Detroit's 911 because the schools were under takeover, going downhill really fast. And I felt like I could write about schools in a way that was going to finally change something for children. So I took that job at the Free Press, and I wrote thousands of stories at the Free Press, y'all, for real, thousands of stories. Yes. I told y'all 10 years ago the state takeover was building up a deficit from whence there would be no return. Told y'all about that warehouse on the east side that had all those school supplies that had piled up for years and years, and nobody was even going in there to check on them or give them to the kids, right? I helped a couple of superintendents get fired. A couple other people go to jail. I wrote a little story about a girl who all she was trying to do was walk to school, but she had to pass 80 abandoned buildings. That story inspired the creation of the Detroit Blight Authority. Some would say, Chastity, you are being a success. But you know, in the 15 years, you can't tell all the stories. You can't tell them all. There were stories that I never got into the paper. Stories that I knew I could have told so that you could know that there are people in the schools that love these kids so much they would do anything for them to help them succeed, to help them live. And stories about grown-ups using money that kids needed. A lot of them stories I didn't get to tell. Like, it was this one DPS police officer, right? DPS police officer goes to school one day, goes to work, and goes into the bathroom at Henry Ford High School to help a teenager have a baby. By the time I found out about it, it was months after the fact. The discussion in the newsroom was, months ago. That's old news. That story didn't get in. Then there was a story about a DPS teacher who wanted to help her students so much that she gave her student's father a kidney. Remember that? Years ago. That story, we ain't do that story either. Are you sure they don't know each other? What about this? What about that? That story didn't get written. And then there was a story about the supplemental education services. That's a fancy word for tutoring programs. Remember, DPS was shoveling tens of millions of dollars into these after-school programs. Church, everybody had a tutoring program. Churches had them, educators had them on the side. Hey, everybody getting paid, but the kids were not getting tutored because they wasn't showing up because the tutoring programs sucked, right? So I said, DPS, run them documents. I want to see all of the data, run the documents. They said, fine, Chastity, you can have them for the low cost of $30,000. DPS didn't want that story told in the paper, didn't want to go through some long, protracted court battle, so that story never got told. This one got me. I spent over a year investigating charter schools. I'm investigating all these highfalutin people in Detroit, high-profile people, big-name people with these low-down, trifling charter schools. Highfalutin charter. Spent over a year on that one. I didn't run. I'm sorry, y'all. I failed. I didn't get a lot of really good stories in the paper. But I'm telling you now, right? Yeah. So I left the paper, and I now work with some of the best journalists this state has ever seen at Bridge Magazine. Yes. We are not for profit. We are for purpose. Our stated mission, our stated purpose, we say this out loud, y'all. Our mission is to investigate and write about policies so that we can make Michigan better. Yes. Some would say, Chastity, you are a success. You are at the Bridge. We hear you on the radio. We see you on TV. Won a bunch of awards. I just got back from Paris lecturing about Detroit public schools. Girl, you a success. No, all I see are schools that are no better than when I got here and started writing these thousands of stories. Now ranked worst in the nation. I done did all this. What a reporter got to do to make a difference, huh? When I write these stories, good or bad, something has to happen. Republicans, Democrats, blacks, whites, you and you and you too, from Detroit to Lansing to DC, you gotta do something. Okay, so what, Chastity? What you want us to do? What you want us to do? I promise you, I am asking you. Elect people who will fund these schools adequately and equitably. Pay Pay teachers like Brittany. Pay them what they are worth so that they want to work here. Do what Mr. Stevens did for me. Have high expectations and expect these kids to succeed. Look, it can happen. Massachusetts used to have mediocre schools. Now they are best in the nation and high in the world because they changed how they do schools. I went to Massachusetts. I investigated it and I reported on what they are doing and I brought it back and I put it in bridge for y'all to see. This can happen. It happened in Massachusetts. It can happen here for kids in Detroit, but you have to choose it. Me. I will be a success when the schools that taught me I would be a success are a success. That's when I will have fulfilled the destiny of that 12-year-old girl from Mr. Stevens' class. When I write something that inspires real change. Until then, if however long it take, my name is Chastity, and I choose to write about Detroit schools.
Mr. Stevens. That's the power of what one teacher can do.